Massive college basketball news today as the National Player of the Year from last year, Oscar Tshiebwe, has decided to return for another year of college. Averaged 17 and 15 last season. And Kentucky obviously lost to St. Peter's in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but it wasn't due to anything Tshiebwe didn't do on the court. He had 30 and 16, so he really showed out, but the rest of the team really struggled in that contest. But he will return, and that's big-time news because Kentucky has another loaded roster headlined by two incoming five-star recruits, Cason Wallace, who's an elite defender, and the brother of former UTSA star Keaton Wallace, and then you have Chris Livingston also coming in, another five-star recruit. And one thing to monitor is what Shaedon Sharpe ends up doing. Five-star recruit, one of the top recruits in the country. He reclassified into midway last year, but he is eligible to enter the NBA draft, and he is testing the draft waters. If he comes back, Kentucky could be the preseason #1 team, but we'll see what ends up happening with him. But the certain players that are coming back, Severe Wheeler, one of the best passers in the country, CJ Frederick, who will kind of step into that role that Kellen Grady had last year as the knockdown shooter. I think Frederick might be a little bit of a better overall shooter. He didn't play last year. He dealt with an injury, and that's kind of been the story of his career. When he's on the court between Iowa and Kentucky, he's been one of the best shooters in the country, but he's dealt with a lot of foot injuries throughout his career, which is kind of limited his upside a bit. But you look at the rest of the returning pieces. Keon Brooks had a solid season. He's also testing the draft waters, but he could be back. Jacob Toppin, same deal with him. Damian Collins, a former top 15 recruit, never got a lot of playing time last year. He had a good game against Alabama, but he will return, and it sounds like, and he should have a pretty solid season, a big-time athlete, and he should have a nice role next to Tshiebwe or off the bench. I'm not sure what his upside is with Tshiebwe there because he's going to play the 5 most of the time, but you could play Damian Collins at the 4 if you want to. Have a really good rebounding, really good defensive lineup, and I think that would work pretty well, but he might be a 15 to 20 minute per game guy. But we've seen guys improve at Kentucky after not playing a ton of minutes their freshman season. Look at Nick Richards. He's kind of a good example that he didn't play a ton as a freshman, didn't play a huge role, but really improved throughout his career and ended up leaving for the NBA draft early, and he's carved out a little bit of a decent role there with the Hornets in the NBA. So it's possible that he could end up, Damian Collins grows a bit of a bigger role. But one thing to monitor also is that Kentucky has several scholarships to fill, so they will likely attack the transfer portal a little bit, add a little more pieces. I'm guessing shooting comes with that. They were a much better three-point shooting team this season compared to recent years. They were 34% from outside. They didn't shoot very many of them. Only 27% of their shots came from outside. And sometimes their best offense really did come from missing a shot and letting Oscar Tshiebwe get the offensive rebound. He was a National Player of the Year for a reason, and he really just dominated the glass on both ends of the floor. He made Kentucky the best rebounding team in college basketball, and can they be that again this year? We'll see, but I think the one thing for Tshiebwe, there's times where it seemed like he has to be a little more consistent finishing inside, I would say, because sometimes some of those offensive rebounds came off of some misses that he should have made. I mean, I think about the Tennessee game where they lost on the road. He really struggled in that one, and he missed a lot of shots he should have made, and he was a National Player of the Year for a reason. It was pretty obvious. But he can become an even better player and maybe a more solidified NBA prospect if he becomes a little more consistent finishing inside. Showed off a little bit of a mid-range game at times, so there's certainly areas of his game where he can improve. He's not a 100% completed player, but he's going to be the best player in college basketball. Again, he's going to be the preseason National Player of the Year and try to win his second National Player of the Year award, and he has a very good chance to do it. I mean, you look at some of the other candidates. Kofi Coburn decided to go pro. He will not return, so he's out of that mix. Armando Bacot from North Carolina is going to be in that mix. He already announced he's returning. Drew Timme, if he returns to Gonzaga, he'll be in that kind of mix. Trace Jackson Davis from Indiana, he'll be in that mix if he does indeed return. But a lot of players will be in the mix, but there's none that can already say that they have a National Player of the Year award like Oscar Tshiebwe. But when you look at the SEC as a whole, let's talk about that a little bit. The conference looks kind of interesting heading into next year. I already talked about it a little bit in the video on Georgia, but you have Arkansas, who's looking like probably the best team in the conference at the moment with their loaded recruiting class featuring Nick Smith, Anthony Black, and Jordan Walsh. That's a big three recruits. If Jalen Williams comes back, there's a very good chance they're the number one preseason team in the country. And Kentucky will probably be top 5, but I don't think they'll be number 1 in the SEC based on that loaded recruiting class by the Arkansas Razorbacks. Look at Auburn. They should be pretty solid, but they have some pieces to replace, like Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler. How do they end up attacking that, and how do they replace their elite shot blocking defensive player of the year player? That's something we're going to have to monitor and see what happens. But the SEC compared to last year looks like it could be down a little bit. I mean, Florida, they look like they could be a little bit improved. LSU will be down based on the roster moves that they've lost. Mississippi State, they look like they were already an NIT team last year. They look like they're going to be even worse than that this year. Vanderbilt looks rough. Texas A&M, they've lost some pieces, but I think they'll end up rebounding a little bit. They made the NIT title game. Tennessee, they're an interesting case because I think they need some pieces from the portal, but overall you get Zakai Ziegler back, you get several really talented pieces back. I think that Tennessee will be a good team again, but the one thing I can say for certain is that Kentucky will be back in the NCAA tournament, and odds are they'll make it past the first round, but something they couldn't do this year because St. Peter's got them. But Oscar Tshiebwe, he will be one of the best players in the country once again for the Kentucky Wildcats. So like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video on Oscar Tshiebwe. And until next time, have a good one.